My name is Sue Rivers. I'm 64 years old. 6 months ago, I sold my woodworking shop, a little red place with peeling paint and windows that smelled of cedar. It was the last piece of what used to be my life with Harold, before the cancer, before the silence of mornings without his coffee. Jake, my only son, said the house in Kelvin Hills had plenty of space. "Bring your things, Mom. The kids will love having you around. We'll even build on that little shed out back, make it yours." So I came. I brought my books, some tools, and a few boxes of family photographs. I left the rest behind. Memories are lighter when you only take what fits in a trunk. Jake and Lauren smiled when I handed them the check. It was the remainder from the sale, enough to finish the renovations, pay down their debt, and get them on their feet, as Lauren put it. First, everything seemed lovely. The house backed onto a stretch of pine trees. My grandson Milo drew me chalk pictures on the sidewalk. I helped Lauren with laundry, picked up groceries, and handled bills until they were less tight. We had dinners on the porch. We laughed about Milo's muddy shoes. Lauren called me Sue instead of Mom, but I didn't mind. Some women need distance. I understand that. But one evening, just as the sky turned soft with dusk and we were all finishing grilled chicken and corn, Lauren said, with her gaze fixed on the backyard, "When we finally make this place ours, I'll turn your little shed into a spa for my parents." She smiled like it was a compliment. I laughed gently. The kind of laugh that doesn't reach your chest. Inside something went still. Not because of what she said, but because of how easily she said it. Like I was a placeholder. Like I had no roots here at all. The shift was slow. At first I thought I imagined it. Lauren began phrasing things differently. Less like conversation, more like instruction. "Can you make sure the counters are wiped before dinner? We're out of oat milk again. Jake likes the windows open in the morning." She used a tone that made me feel like an employee. And I nodded, smiled, did as asked. That's what you do when you're trying to belong. Then came the scheduling. My laundry day moved. "Just easier for us to have Tuesdays," she said, folding her arms. Milo's afternoon cartoons replaced my evening news. "He doesn't need that kind of energy before bed," Lauren said. I let it go. What I didn't let go was the way Jake watched this unfold. He said nothing. Not when she turned off the TV while I was mid-episode. Not when she muttered about how long I took to unload the dishwasher. He would clear his throat. That was all. One afternoon, I stepped out to water the flowers and ran into Molly, our neighbor from across the street. "Hey Sue," she said. "You okay?" I must have looked tired. He nodded. She hesitated, then leaned in. "I probably shouldn't say this, but I overheard Lauren at the market. She said something about you holding on to the house too long. It didn't sound kind." My hands were still damp from the hose. I gripped the nozzle a little tighter. "Thanks, Molly," I said. That evening I made dinner and ate with them. Chicken again. Milo spilled juice and I cleaned it up. Lauren scrolled her phone. Jake talked about a project at work. No one looked at me. That night, I sat in my room and laid out photos on the bed. Harold, Jake at 6, our dog Moose. I looked at the lines on my face in the mirror. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was bracing. For what I wasn't yet sure. It was early spring when I decided to take a trip to the mountains with my friend Joan. Just 3 days. We packed light, drove with the windows down, and stayed in a cabin with creaky floors and chipped mugs that smelled faintly of pine. For the first time in months, I laughed without caution. We didn't talk about Jake or Lauren. We hiked, read paperback novels, and made tea in silence. When I came back I felt rested not just in body but in soul. That peace lasted until I pulled into the driveway. My things were on the ground. Cardboard boxes, clothes folded haphazardly, photo albums stacked under a garbage bag. My late husband's fishing rod lay crooked in the grass, the line tangled. At first I thought there had been a mistake. Then I saw the note, pinned to the front door with blue painter's tape. Lauren's parents are moving in. We decided this is best for everyone. I hope you understand. No greeting. No farewell. Just logistics. I stood there for a while. One hand on the car door, the other holding the note. The wind picked up slightly, and I watched it flutter. Then I picked up the rod. Gently. Untangled the line. Laid it in the trunk. The rest I packed slowly. Joan offered her guest room. I stayed there 2 nights. We didn't talk much. She knew not to push. On the 3rd morning, I drove to a small diner in town and ordered eggs. I sat by the window watching people pass. That's when I saw Janet, an old friend. We had taken pottery classes together once, years ago. Her face turned pale when she saw me. "Sue," she said, coming over. "I've been meaning to call." She looked down, guilty. Sat opposite me. "I was at the market a few weeks ago. Lauren was there. She was talking to someone I didn't know. She said." She trailed off. "She said they'd be able to sell the house as soon as you were gone. That you'd sign anything. Because you always did." I didn't speak. Janet reached across the table. Gently placed her hand on mine. I didn't want to believe it. I still don't. I nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me," I said. Later that day I found the deed. I kept it in an envelope tucked inside a family cookbook. My name was still on it. I sat down with a cup of chamomile tea and stared at the paper. It wasn't grief I felt. It was resolve. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Had been a plan. And it was time for mine. The next morning I called Richard. He had been Harold's best friend for over 30 years. Once a real estate attorney, now semi-retired and spending his days fishing and restoring old radios. When he answered, his voice was as steady as ever. "They left a note instead of talking," I said. He didn't ask for more. "Bring the deed. I'll make coffee." I drove to his house by the inlet, a white clapboard home with peeling shutters and hydrangeas out front. We sat in his sunroom. He read the document carefully, adjusting his glasses. "You're still a legal owner," he said. "They can't sell without your signature." I watched the tide pull back from the shore. "I want to stop whatever they're planning." Quietly. He nodded. "Then we file an injunction. And we start a private listing. You can choose where the proceeds go. They get nothing unless you allow it." I signed the papers. 3 days later the sale was frozen. Quietly. No announcement. No warning. A private real estate firm arranged the listing. Discreet. Respectful. The kind that caters to women who don't want to explain. I had the proceeds transferred to a trust. Then I opened a fund under my name. A support program for elderly women in crisis. Not a cent went to Jake. Or to Lauren. By the end of the month, the house was no longer theirs to touch. The following week a letter came. From a lawyer I recognized. Someone Jake had mentioned once, years ago. It asked for a fair reconsideration, and suggested we could resolve this amicably. I placed it in a drawer. 2 days later, there was a knock at Joan's door. Jake and Lauren. They looked smaller in person. Not in size but in presence. I met them at a diner downtown. A neutral place. Jake ordered coffee. Lauren held a manila envelope. Her nails were chipped. "We're sorry," Jake began. "We just got overwhelmed," Lauren added. "Things moved too fast." Listened. They slid the envelope across the table. Contained transfer papers. Proposal. Pushed it back. "I'll think about it," I said. Lauren's face tensed. Jake leaned forward. "You're punishing us," he said. "We're family," Lauren added. I picked up my teacup, held it steady. "You only miss me because I finally said no." Silence settled between us. The kind that doesn't ask to be filled. I stood, placed a $5 bill under my plate, and left. Outside, the sun was warm on my face. I didn't look back. Later that evening, I packed up the rest of my things from Joan's house. She hugged me tightly, said nothing. I moved into a small studio apartment near the old pier, the same one where I used to teach weekend art classes. The walls were pale blue. The windows tall. The air smelled like salt. Anne packed slowly. And for the first time in years, Everything in that space belonged to me. First they stayed quiet. Then came the messages. Jake texted, "Can we talk?" Just us. I didn't respond. Lauren sent an email. Subject line, "About the house." In it, she apologized for the confusion. Claimed they were under stress. Said Milo missed me. Included a smiling photo of him holding a crayon drawing labeled, "Grandma's house." I closed the browser. Then came the second wave. Not from them but from others. A cousin in Minnesota messaged, "Lauren says you're acting out of anger. Hope you're okay." An old neighbor emailed, "Jake told us you misunderstood. That you were always planning to move." The narrative was spreading. Quietly. Strategically. I said nothing. Instead I contacted Richard. He filed a cease and desist. Drafted a statement outlining ownership, dates, and legal obligations. "Do you want to go public?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I want them to show their full hand." A few days later, I received a registered letter. It was from Jake and Lauren's attorney, requesting a formal mediation session. The language was neutral. The intent wasn't. Richard and I prepared. We reviewed the paper trail. Emails, deed transfers, my financial contributions, Lauren's market conversations, transcribed by Molly in a written affidavit. The mediation took place at a neutral office space. Glass walls. Neutral carpet. The mediator was calm, professional, unreadable. Jake and Lauren sat across from me. Their lawyer spoke first. "Our clients regret any miscommunications. They seek an equitable division of assets." Richard replied, "My client seeks no division. She is sole legal owner. What she seeks is distance." The mediator looked at me. "Mrs. Rivers, would you like to speak?" I folded my hands. They made a plan that didn't include me. Now I'm making one that doesn't include them. Lauren opened her mouth. The mediator raised a hand. "This is not the time." Jake looked pale. Not with shame. With disbelief. As if he never imagined a world where I held the final word. After the session, Richard turned to me in the parking lot. "They'll try something else. Be ready." He nodded. And I was. The next move came quickly. They filed a motion in family court. Claimed I was financially unstable. That my mental state was in question. That I had been coerced by outside influences. Richard laughed when he read it. "They're desperate. But we didn't underestimate." I underwent a full psychiatric evaluation. Cleared with flying colors. I requested notarized copies. We gathered bank statements, transaction logs, therapist letters. Every box checked. Every claim preemptively neutralized. The judge reviewed the evidence. Dismissed their motion in under 10 minutes. Sanctioned them for court misuse. Jake looked at me as we exited the courtroom. His eyes weren't angry. Just confused. As if he still couldn't grasp how the person who raised him could stand so still. So clear. That evening I walked to the pier. Tide was low. The seagulls quiet. I stood there until the last of the sun dipped below the horizon. And for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of what had been. Only the steady lightness of what would never return. Weeks passed. Kept my routine simple. Morning tea. A walk by the bay. Quiet meals. I stitched patches onto an old quilt I found in a box marked, "Winter Things." Joan came by once a week with lemon bars and silence. We didn't need to talk about it anymore. It had become its own chapter, sealed. Then the letters started again. Handwritten. Different tone. "Milo misses you. We know we messed up. Family is all that matters." Kept them in a drawer. Not to revisit but to remember. One afternoon, while sorting papers, I found a certificate from the local library's volunteer program. I had signed up last winter before everything fell apart. I showed up the next week. The library smelled of dust and old bindings. They placed me in the archive section. Suited me. Quiet. Unbothered. Useful without performance. One morning, a woman named Hester approached me. Mid-60s, wire-rim glasses. "You're Sue Rivers, right?" I heard what happened. I hope this isn't too forward, but... She handed me a flyer. A small non-profit was hosting a seminar series on financial boundaries in family systems. They're looking for guest speakers. Stories like yours. I said I'd think about it. That night, I reread Lauren's last letter. We just wanted security. We thought you understood. Why are you making us pay for it? The irony wasn't lost on me. They wanted comfort at the cost of me. I emailed Hester. Yes. The seminar took place in a small community center. Folding chairs. Lukewarm coffee. Nervous introductions. I spoke with clarity. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I talked about quiet erasure. About how love, when stretched into obligation, begins to crack. About how being helpful became being expendable. About how silence was my first form of rebellion. Afterwards, 2 women stayed behind. One said, "I didn't know anyone else had gone through that." The other hugged me. I went home, opened all the windows, and let the air cleanse the space. The next day I received a certified letter. Inside was a formal apology. Signed by both Jake and Lauren. It read, "We acknowledge our treatment was unjust. We understand the consequences. We hope, in time, you can find a way to remember us kindly." I folded it neatly. Slipped it between pages of an old cookbook. Let it stay there. That afternoon I began writing something else. Not a letter. Not a legal brief. Guide. For women like me. For those who forgot they could say no. I titled it simply, "After the Door Closes." Because that's where peace begins. The studio filled with golden light each morning. I began each day the same. Jasmine tea, a cracked leather journal, a slow walk along the seawall. I wasn't in hiding. I wasn't in mourning. I was simply in place. Cascade House, the non-profit started from the house proceeds, had already helped 5 women. Joan helped me run it. Quietly. Efficiently. No press. No speeches. Just help. One of the women, Clara, had been pushed out of her daughter's home. Another, Denise, had been convinced to co-sign a business loan she never saw again. Their stories echoed mine, but none of us needed to compare. We understood. Jake and Lauren didn't reach out again. That made it easier. The last of their debt was collected through a lien on a small rental they tried to flip. I never saw the final total. Richard handled it. That was the boundary. One crisp morning in late October, I stood at the window with my tea and realized I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for apologies. Not for clarity. Not even for closure. I had become whole without it. I was just Sue. I saw Milo once, unexpectedly. He was with a school group at the library. He didn't notice me. I didn't interrupt. But later, one of the librarians handed me a folded paper. "He left this at the desk," she said. "It has your name. We figured it was for you." It was a drawing. A house by the water. A woman with silver hair standing on a porch. The son in the corner wore a wide smile. At the bottom, in block letters, "Miss you, Grandma. I remember the cookies." I placed it on my bookshelf. Not to grieve. Just to see. Peter's old radio still worked. I tuned it each evening. Soft jazz. The occasional foghorn from the harbor. One night, I opened the windows and heard an owl call once, then again. Smiled. I'd told my story. Now I was writing a new one. Not as a mother. Not as a lesson. Just as a woman who remembered her own worth. And lived like it mattered. That was the final line. That was enough.